She had just saved a life. The monitor was steady. The old woman was breathing. 14 minutes of work, precise and clean, and the patient was going to make it. That was the moment Sylvia Hargrove chose to slap her across the face. Not before, after. That detail matters. Keep it in mind. My name is Amara Ose. 7 years as a registered nurse. Highest patient satisfaction scores in her department, 3 years running. She clocked into Meridian General Hospital on a Friday night the way she always did, 15 minutes early. Badge pinned straight. Actually, let me back up a second. That badge. It was a small thing. Earlier that evening, maybe 40 minutes before everything changed, Amara was at the nurse's station when a gurney came through too fast and clipped the edge of the counter. Nobody got hurt, but the impact knocked her badge sideways, dangling off the clip at an angle. She stopped, straightened it, pressed it flat against her chest, made sure the clip was secure. One of the other nurses, Priya Nair, 6 months on the floor, watched her do it and didn't think much of it. Just a habit, she figured. It wasn't just a habit. That badge meant something to Amara that Priya didn't know yet, that Sylvia Hargrove was about to find out, and that the rest of us would understand by the end of tonight. The ER was moving the way Friday nights move. Fast, loud, no pauses between problems. Nadine Coulter, 20 years as head nurse, was managing the floor like someone conducting an orchestra in a burning building. Calm face, clipped words, eyes tracking everything. Amara passed her on the way to Bay 3. Constance Hargrove, Nadine said without looking up. 77, chest pain, irregular rhythm. Came in by ambulance. Family is on the way. Amara pulled the chart. She introduced herself to the woman on the gurney, a small woman with silver hair, wearing a pale blue cardigan buttoned all the way to the collar, despite the warmth of the room. Constance reached for Amara's hand before she could start the assessment. Her grip was light. Her eyes were frightened in the specific way that older people get frightened in hospitals. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, private terror they try hard to hide. "You have kind hands," Constance said. Her voice was thin. Amara squeezed back gently. "I'm going to take good care of you." She meant it. She always meant it. That was the other thing about Amara that nobody in that room fully understood until later. She wasn't kind because someone was watching. She was kind when nobody was watching, when there was nothing to gain, when the patient was scared and alone and couldn't give her anything in return except that small, desperate grip on her hand. 2 bays down, behind a curtain, an older woman named Greta Lamb was listening. 71 years old, admitted that afternoon with a fractured hip, waiting for a bed upstairs. She had been in that bay for 3 hours. She had watched a lot of nurses come and go. She had noticed Amara earlier. The way Amara stopped to check on her, not because Greta was her patient, but because she happened to be passing and noticed Greta's water cup was empty. "You don't have to," Greta had said. "I know," Amara had answered, and filled it anyway. Greta tucked that away the way people tuck away small things that turn out to matter. Amara worked on Constance for 14 minutes. She read the monitors, adjusted the oxygen, administered medication at the right dosage at the right time. She talked to Constance in a low, steady voice the entire time. Not about medicine, just small things. Whether Constance liked the cardigan she was wearing, whether she'd eaten dinner. Small things that keep a person tethered when everything in their body is trying to pull them under. At the 11-minute mark, Constance's rhythm was stabilizing. At the 14-minute mark, the monitor settled into a pattern that meant she was going to be okay. Amara stepped back, pulled off her gloves, exhaled once, quietly. Constance's eyes were wet. Amara reached for a tissue from the tray beside the bed. She handed it over. Their hands touched for a moment. Neither of them spoke. That was the silent exchange. No words, just two women in a hospital on a Friday night, one of whom had just pulled the other back from the edge of something serious, both of them knowing it. That was the moment Sylvia Hargrove walked through the door. Okay, I need you to picture this correctly. Sylvia Hargrove was not loud when she entered. She didn't storm in. She walked in the way certain people walk into rooms, like the room was already hers, and everyone in it was a minor inconvenience to be organized around her schedule. Cream blazer, pearls at her ears, a handbag that cost more than Amara's monthly rent, and was probably carried that way on purpose, angled out, visible. She looked at Constance. Then she looked at Amara, and something shifted behind her eyes. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't concern for her mother. It was something older and uglier than either of those things. A kind of assessment, the kind that happens in less than 1 second and says everything about what a person actually believes about the world. "Excuse me." Her voice was pleasant, too pleasant. "Are you the attending nurse for my mother?" Amara looked up. "Yes, ma'am. Your mother is stable. Her rhythm has normalized, and she's responding well." Sylvia didn't react to the medical information. She tilted her head just slightly. The pearls caught the light. "I'm going to need to speak to whoever is managing this bay." "That's me," Amara said. A pause, short but full. "I see." Sylvia's eyes moved across Amara slowly. Not fast, the way people scan a room. Slow, the way people look at something they're deciding whether to touch. "And how long have you been here?" 7 years at Meridian." Another pause. "Well," Sylvia straightened slightly. Her voice dropped just low enough that it wouldn't carry to the next bay, just loud enough that it did anyway. "I want to make sure my mother is receiving care from someone properly qualified. Someone whose background is, shall we say, appropriate to the environment." The ER kept moving around them. A cart rolled by. Someone called a number over the intercom. Monitors beeped in adjacent bays. Amara looked at her steadily. She didn't respond immediately. She had heard variations of this her entire career. The phrasing changes. The meaning never does. "Your mother is in good hands," Amara said. "If you have clinical questions, I'm happy to answer them." Sylvia's mouth curved into something that was technically a smile. "I don't have clinical questions." She glanced at Constance, then back at Amara. "I have questions about oversight." This is the part where I have to stop for a second, because what happened next is the part that changes the story. Not what Sylvia said, what she waited for. She waited for her mother to be safe first. She waited until the monitor was steady and Constance was breathing and the crisis was over. And then, only then, did she make her move. That's not an accident. That's a person who understands exactly what she's doing and does it anyway. Calculated. Cold. Okay, back to the room. Amara had turned to update the chart. Professional, close to the situation, getting back to work. That was when Sylvia stepped forward. What she said at full volume. Not loud the way angry people are loud. Loud the way powerful people are loud when they want a room to hear them and know they don't care who hears. She said that someone with Amara's background belonged in a different part of the hospital. Not this part, not the part where decisions got made. The ER went quiet, in that specific way that spaces go quiet when something wrong happens publicly, and everyone is waiting to see who is going to be the first to say so. 17 people in earshot. Not one of them moved. Amara turned around slowly. Her face was still. Before she could speak, Sylvia reached out and grabbed the badge off Amara's chest. The clip snapped. The badge hit the floor. And then the slap. Open palm, hard enough that the sound cut through the noise of the entire floor. Amara hit the floor. Stop. 17 people. One security guard, Calvin Reese, standing by the elevator. A red light glowing on the body camera clipped to his chest, his hand on his radio, waiting for an order that he already knew wasn't coming. Greta Lamb's hand pulled back the curtain 2 inches, just enough to see. Amara got up. Not fast, not dramatically. She just got up the way people get up when they have been taught by experience that the ground is not somewhere they have the option to stay. Her cheek was burning. She could feel the shape of Sylvia's hand on her face, a specific, detailed heat. She looked at Sylvia. She looked at Dr. Owen Mercer, the hospital administrator, who had appeared from somewhere down the hall, the way administrators appear when they sense a situation involving a major donor, fast and slightly out of breath. Then she looked at the badge on the floor. She did not pick it up. "Dr. Mercer," Amara said. Her voice was even. "I need to file an incident report." Mercer's eyes went to Sylvia, then to the badge on the floor, then back to Amara. He cleared his throat. "Amara, why don't we step away from the bay?" "She struck me in front of witnesses." "I understand that. Let's just give everyone some space to—" He stopped himself. The word he was reaching for didn't exist in any policy manual, because what he was reaching for was a way to make Amara's bruise less inconvenient than Sylvia Hargrove's checkbook. That was when Harlan Vick arrived. Vick was the director of internal operations. His title meant he managed the gap between what the hospital's written policies said and what the hospital actually did when the written policies conflicted with money. He was good at it. He had been doing it for 11 years. He was also, notably, already there. Nobody had called him. The ER was 5 floors down from his office. He had arrived in under 4 minutes. That detail would matter later. "Amara." His voice was warm, professionally warm, the kind of warmth that means nothing. "There's obviously been an upsetting incident here tonight. I want you to know we take that seriously. But given the complexity of the situation, I think the best path forward is to let internal operations facilitate a structured review. In the meantime, it might be best for everyone if you took the rest of the shift." "The rest of the shift," Amara repeated. "Just tonight, while we get a clearer picture." Preston Hargrove, who had been standing slightly behind his wife since arriving, looked at the floor. Constance Hargrove, from the bed, turned her face toward the wall. "Dr. Mercer." Amara kept her voice low and direct. "There are cameras in this hallway. There are 17 people who watched what happened. I have a right to file a report tonight." Mercer opened his mouth. Sylvia cut in, smooth and unhurried. "Owen?" Just his first name. The kind of first name that means, "I have your number in my personal contacts." The Hargrove Foundation's equipment contract is still on the table. I'd hate for something like this to complicate that process. $1.8 million. Not annual. A single contract. Pending signature. Right now. Mercer looked at Vic. Vic looked at Mercer. Amara watched the two of them make a decision in real time without saying a word. "Amara," Mercer said finally, "go home. We'll be in touch tomorrow." She looked at him for 3 full seconds, long enough for everyone in range to be slightly uncomfortable. Then she bent down and picked up her badge from the floor. She held it in her hand. She did not clip it back on. She walked to the nurse's station. She picked up her bag. She walked past the bay where she had just spent 14 minutes keeping a 77-year-old woman alive. She walked through the automatic doors. Nobody followed her. In the bay, behind the curtain, Greta Lamb let the fabric fall closed again. She lay very still for a moment, staring at the ceiling. Then she reached over to the tray beside her bed, picked up the small notepad a volunteer had left earlier, and wrote down 4 things she had seen. Date, time, what happened, what she heard. She folded the paper, put it under her pillow. Nobody asked her to. Nobody knew she did it. At the nurse's station, Nadine Coulter pulled up an incident report form on her computer. She had started typing. Patient family member physically struck RN on duty. She got that far. Her phone buzzed. A message from Vic. Not from Mercer, from Vic personally. "Nadine, legal has advised us to pause on any documentation until internal ops completes a preliminary assessment. I know you understand how delicate these situations can be. Your contract renewal is coming up next quarter, and I'd hate for a procedural misstep to complicate that process." She read it twice. Procedural misstep. Her contract renewal. Her 2 kids. Her mortgage. 15 years until she could retire. She closed the form without saving. She hated herself for exactly 7 seconds. Then she minimized the window, kept a screenshot of Vic's message in a personal folder, and went back to managing the floor. That screenshot was a decision she made quietly, alone, with no guarantee it would ever matter. She made it anyway. Calvin Reese knocked on Mercer's office door at 11:47 that night. "The body camera," Calvin said. "Standard protocol is to upload within the hour." "Hold it!" Mercer didn't look up from his desk. "Internal review." Calvin stood in the doorway. 19 years in security. He had seen internal reviews before. He knew exactly what they were for when the person who did the hitting had a foundation named after them. "Dr. Mercer, that nurse got assaulted." "Calvin." Mercer finally looked up. "I appreciate your diligence. Go home." Calvin left. He did not upload the footage. He did not delete it either. He drove home, pulled into his driveway, and turned the engine off. He sat there. 17 years in security. He had watched a lot of situations get managed. He had learned early on that managed and resolved were 2 different words that sometimes got used as if they meant the same thing. He thought about the red light on the body camera. Still on. He had checked it twice on the drive home. He thought about Amara walking through those automatic doors alone. The way she'd held her badge in her hand instead of clipping it back on. He had noticed that. He had noticed everything. That was his job. He was very good at his job. He sat in the driveway for 20 minutes. Then he went inside, took the camera off, set it on his kitchen table, and looked at it. He was not going to upload it tonight. Mercer had been clear, and until he understood exactly who needed to know what he had, he wasn't going to hand it to the wrong person. But he wasn't going to let it disappear either. He put the camera in the inner pocket of his jacket, the one with the zip, the one he would wear to work tomorrow, and the day after. Then he went to bed. He didn't sleep much, but that was fine. He had learned a long time ago that sleep and conscience didn't always keep the same schedule. Amara sat in the parking garage for 22 minutes, engine off, lights off. The garage smelled like exhaust and cold concrete, and the particular kind of stillness that exists in public places after midnight when most people have gone home. One hand pressed flat against her cheekbone, feeling the warmth of the bruise spreading outward. It was tender in a way that was spreading. Not just the spot where Sylvia's palm had connected, but the whole left side of her face, aching in layers. She opened her phone. One missed call from Rafael. 35 minutes ago. She looked at the timestamp. 35 minutes ago meant he had called before it happened. Before the slap. Before the badge on the floor. Before Mercer sent her home with the careful language of a man covering something up. Why had he called then? She didn't call back. She just sat there. The thing about sitting in a car alone at midnight with a bruise on your face is that your mind goes to places you don't invite it. She thought about the 7 years, the double shifts, the patients whose names she still remembered, the ones who had grabbed her hand and the ones who hadn't been able to. She thought about the employee of the quarter photo on the wall of the 3rd floor break room, her face in it, taken 6 months ago. She thought about the form she had filled out for charge nurse consideration, sitting in some folder on someone's desk, waiting. She thought about quitting. Not loudly, not with a dramatic announcement, just the quiet, specific thought of walking away from a place that had shown her, clearly and publicly, what she was worth to it. She could. She had the experience. She could walk into any hospital in the state and have a job within a week. She didn't have to go back. She sat with that thought for a long time. Let it sit next to everything else. Then she did something she couldn't fully explain later. She turned on the front-facing camera on her phone and took a photo of her own face. No filter. Bad parking garage light, that flat orange that makes everyone look ill. The bruise was visible already, purple and spreading from her cheekbone down toward her jaw. Not to post, not to send, just to have. Just so she could look at it later and know it was real. Because she already knew what the next few days would bring. The careful language. The process. The people who would ask her, in gentle, professional voices, whether she was sure about what she remembered, whether she might be mischaracterizing the situation, whether she understood the complexity of what happened. She was sure. The photo was proof she was sure. She looked at it for a moment. Then she put the phone face down on the passenger seat. She didn't decide to stay in that moment. She didn't make a declaration. She just wiped her face once with the back of her hand, started the engine, and pulled out of the garage. 18 minutes home. She counted traffic lights. There were 9. It was the only thing she could think to count. Rafael Voss came home the next evening, carrying takeout from the Thai place she liked. He was already talking before he got through the door, something about green curry, extra spicy, no mushrooms. He stopped when he saw her face. He set the food down on the counter, slowly, the way you put something down when you need your hands free. He crossed the room and crouched in front of the couch where she was sitting, legs tucked under her, still in yesterday's scrubs. He raised one hand and very carefully touched the edge of the bruise with 2 fingers. She flinched, not from pain, from being seen. He looked at her for a long moment. "Tell me," he said. That was all. 2 words. No preamble, no reassurance, no instruction about how to feel. She told him everything. Not dramatically, not with tears. She told it the way she had filed patient charts for 7 years. Detailed, sequential, complete. When she finished, Rafael was quiet. Then he stood up, leaned forward, and kissed her forehead and walked to the balcony. He slid the glass door shut behind him and made a phone call. Now, here is the thing about Rafael Voss that Amara knew and didn't fully know at the same time. She knew he was a businessman. She knew people returned his calls quickly. She knew he kept certain parts of his professional life separate from their life together. And she had accepted that the way you accept someone's handedness or their sleep schedule. It was just a part of him. What she didn't know, the full picture, was the scope of it. The Voss Group was not a company. It was more accurate to say it was a consequence. 23 years of Rafael's uncle building something, and then Rafael spending the last 8 years becoming the person that something answered to. Board members took his calls on the first ring. Luca Ferri, who had worked alongside that family for 21 years, answered before the second ring was finished. Luca was not muscle. He wasn't a lawyer. He was the person you call when you need to know what actually happened, documented, sourced, and delivered before morning. "Sylvia Hargrove," Rafael said. "I need everything, every complaint filed against her, every settlement, every NDA, going back as far as there's a record." Luca didn't ask why. He never asked why. Rafael made a second call. To Gerald Ashby, Vice Chair of Meridian General's Board of Directors. Ashby picked up on the second ring. He always picked up for Rafael. 3 years ago, Ashby had received a construction contract through a Voss-affiliated development company. The kind of contract that represents a turning point in a career. The kind you don't forget. And don't forget who made it possible. "Emergency board meeting," Rafael said. "Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock. Make it happen." "I'll make it happen," Ashby said. Third call. Diane Okafor, civil rights litigator, one of the most recognized in the state. Rafael had never needed to call her before tonight. "I'm sending you footage by morning," he said. "Assault on a healthcare worker. Institutional cover-up. I need you at Meridian General by 10 o'clock Tuesday." Fourth call. A journalist who covered healthcare accountability. Rafael's voice stayed the same through all 4 calls. Even, quiet, no heat. "Be at Meridian General Tuesday at noon. Bring a photographer." He hung up. He stood on the balcony for a while, looking out at the city. Then he went back inside, sat next to Amara on the couch, and pulled her in against his chest. "You're going to be okay," he said. She leaned into him. Her eyes were already closing. She didn't sleep deeply, but she rested, and that was enough. Rafael didn't sleep at all. He sat with his arm around her and watched the bruise on her face deepen in the lamplight, and waited for Luca to call. The call came at 11:51 that night. Luca had delivered everything, and it was worse than Rafael expected. 4 harassment complaints against Sylvia Hargrove documented. A household worker in 2016 who said Sylvia had thrown a ceramic bowl during an argument, striking her arm. A housekeeper in 2018. A nanny in 2020. A restaurant hostess in 2022. Every single complaint settled. Every single settlement sealed with a non-disclosure agreement and a payment that made the problem disappear. 4 times, different people, different years, same pattern. Sylvia Hargrove didn't lose her temper occasionally. She had a system. Find someone with less power. Hit them, literally or otherwise. Write a check. Move on. And it had worked, every time, until now. Luca also sent the board member list, 11 names. And there was Gerald Ashby, right where Rafael expected him. Then the footage. Luca had obtained the hospital security recording through a contact in Meridian's IT department. A person who owed the Voss family a favor and understood that when Rafael called, the answer was yes. 21 minutes. Everything. Rafael sat at the kitchen table in the dark, laptop open, and watched all of it. Amara was asleep on the couch behind him. He had tilted the screen enough that the light wouldn't reach her. He watched Amara walk into the bay. He watched her introduce herself to Constance. He watched 14 minutes of clinical work, the kind that looks routine from the outside and isn't. He could see it in the way she read the monitors, checked, rechecked, decisions happening quietly behind a composed face. Then Sylvia came in. He watched the assessment happen in her eyes in 5 seconds. He had seen that look before, in boardrooms, at dinners, in hallways where certain people moved like the space owed them passage. He knew exactly what it was. He watched Amara stay steady through the first comment. He watched her turn back to the chart, giving the situation an exit ramp. Sylvia didn't take it. He watched the badge get grabbed. He watched the slap. He went back, watched it again. Each time, his face showed less, not more. Less. The way a system goes quiet when it switches from standby to something operational. What he felt was still there. It was just not in a place that was useful right now. He sat for a while after the footage ended. Behind him, Amara shifted on the couch, pulled the blanket tighter. He waited until she was still again. He thought about the call, the one he'd made 35 minutes before it happened. He had called because he'd remembered the anniversary of the night they met. There was a restaurant. He had wanted to make a reservation for later in the week. A surprise. He had called to check her schedule without giving away why. She hadn't picked up. He looked at his phone log, then at the timestamp on the footage. He made the 3 remaining calls. His voice was the same through all of them. Even, specific, no performance. Then he went back to the couch, sat next to where Amara was sleeping, and stayed there until the room started to go gray with early light. He didn't sleep. He was just there. And sometimes that's the thing that matters most. Not the rescue, not the strategy. Just being there, in the dark, making sure someone doesn't have to wake up alone. Tuesday, 9:58 in the morning. The boardroom on the third floor of Meridian General had 11 leather chairs, a projector screen at the far end, and a view of the parking lot below. The board members were already seated. Some had coffee. None of them were drinking it. Ashby had called the meeting at 7 that morning. No agenda, no explanation, non-negotiable. Dr. Mercer was at the far end of the table. He had not slept. He looked like a man who had spent the previous 48 hours building a careful structure and was now beginning to hear something wrong in the foundation. Harlan Vick sat beside him, jacket on, posture relaxed. He had done nothing wrong, technically. He had sent a message to a nurse about a contract renewal. He had facilitated a voluntary administrative leave. Everything he had done had language around it. Careful, protected language. He was not concerned. Sylvia and Preston Hargrove arrived at 10:02. Sylvia wore a cream blazer again, different from Friday. Same energy. She had been told this was a donor relations meeting. She walked in accordingly. She sat down. And then the door opened one more time. Rafael Voss walked in. He didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table opposite Mercer and looked around the room the way people look around rooms when they have already decided what is going to happen in them. Preston Hargrove's hand went still on his coffee cup. He knew that name. Everyone in the room who moved in the right circles knew that name. Sylvia did not know it yet. "Good morning." Raphael's voice was even. "My name is Rafael Voss. I'm here because Amara Ose is my fiancée." Sylvia's expression didn't change immediately. It changed about 2 seconds later when she processed what that meant. Friday night, Rafael continued. A registered nurse with 7 years of service and a spotless record stabilized a cardiac patient in this hospital's emergency department. While she was doing that, she was verbally degraded. When the patient was stable, she was physically assaulted. And then, rather than address the person who committed the assault, this hospital placed the nurse on administrative leave and suppressed the documentation. He set a laptop on the table, connected it to the projector, and pressed play. 21 minutes. The boardroom watched all of it. They watched Sylvia look at Amara and make her calculation in the first 5 seconds. They watched the words, the pearls, the tilt of the head. They watched the badge being grabbed. They watched the slap. The sound came through the laptop speakers, smaller than it had been in the room that night. It was still enough to make 2 of the board members look away. They watched Amara hit the floor and get back up and go back to work. They watched Mercer arrive. They watched Vic arrive. They watched the conversation. They watched Amara walk out alone. When the footage ended, Rafael left the last frame frozen on the screen. The back of Amara's scrubs, the empty hallway. Nobody spoke. In the corner of the room, almost behind the door, a small, silver-haired woman, in a chair nobody had assigned to her, cleared her throat quietly. Greta Lamb had not been invited to this meeting. She had found out about it through the nurse on her floor, who had mentioned it in passing. She had asked her daughter to bring her. Her daughter had wheeled her up in a chair because Greta's hip still made walking difficult. Nobody had asked her to come. She didn't have a lawyer. She didn't have an agenda. She was just a 71-year-old woman who had been lying in a hospital bed 2 curtains away from everything. and she had written 4 things down on a notepad, and she thought someone in an official capacity should probably hear them. "I was there," she said simply. The room turned. "I heard everything. I saw some of it. I wrote it down that night." She held up the folded paper. It was creased from being under a pillow. "I don't know if this helps, but I figured if nobody else was going to say what they saw, I could at least say what I saw." One of the board members reached for the paper. Vic opened his mouth. Rafael looked at him. Just looked. Didn't speak. Vic closed his mouth. Diane Okafor stepped forward from where she had been standing quietly near the wall. She set her business card on the table in front of Mercer. "The security footage and the body camera recording have been submitted to the district attorney's office as of 8 this morning," she said. "A formal complaint regarding the hospital's handling of this incident has been filed with the State Nursing Board. A reporter from the Meridian Tribune is currently in the lobby." She paused. "I'll be filing a civil suit on behalf of my client by end of week, unless this board takes meaningful action today." Sylvia leaned forward. Her voice had an edge in it now. "Do you people understand who my family is? What our foundation contributes to this institution? $1.8 million doesn't just—" "Mrs. Hargrove." Rafael's voice was exactly the same temperature it had been since he walked in. Even, unhurried. "Do you know who saved your mother's life Friday night?" Silence. "Your mother went into cardiac distress while you were standing 3 feet away. The person who stabilized her was Amara Ose. She did that in 14 minutes. She did it with your handprint on her face." He let that sit. "That's who you hit. That's who this hospital sent home." Preston Hargrove was staring at the table. Sylvia's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Nothing came out. Vic tried one more time. "The documentation around this incident clearly shows that standard protocol was." Mr. Vic, Diane Okafor placed a second document on the table. "We have the message you sent to Nadine Coulter on Friday night, the one referencing her contract renewal, and the email Dr. Mercer sent to HR at 12:31 Saturday morning, and a record of the incident report that was deleted from the system before it could be submitted." Vic went very still, and in going very still, in the particular way that guilty people go still when the room suddenly understands the shape of what they've been doing, he confirmed everything. The board chair called for a vote. 6 minutes. Unanimous. 3 things happened in the hours that followed. Dr. Mercer was escorted from the building by security, the same security he had called off 48 hours earlier. He walked out through the lobby with his jacket over his arm and did not look at the reporter standing near the entrance with a photographer. The reporter noted that anyway. Harlan Vick was placed under formal investigation by the hospital's board and referred to the State Health Oversight Commission. The message to Nadine, the deleted report, the timed arrival in the ER on Friday night. It added up to something that had a name in regulatory language. It had consequences with that name. What Vic had not counted on, and what turned out to matter most, was that Nadine Coulter had kept a screenshot, not because she was certain it would be useful, because it was the one thing she could do that night that cost less than staying silent. That one screenshot, sitting in a personal folder on her phone for 4 days, was what turned an incident into a pattern into a case. Small choices compound. Sylvia Hargrove was informed that local law enforcement would be contacting her within 24 hours regarding the assault. In the boardroom, as people gathered their things and filed out, Preston Hargrove sat very still for a moment. Then he stood up, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the door without speaking. He held it open for Diane Okafor, who was still gathering documents. She looked at him. He looked at the floor. That was all. Constance Hargrove had been discharged that morning and was already home. She was sitting in her kitchen with a cup of tea going cold in front of her, thinking about the woman with kind hands who would talk to her about her cardigan while keeping her heart from giving out. Thinking about what her daughter had done to those hands. She sat there for a long time. The tea went cold. She didn't get up to warm it. Outside, the day kept moving. The hospital kept moving. The ER below filled up again the way it always did on a Tuesday afternoon. Amara's phone buzzed at 11:43 Tuesday morning. She was on the couch. Same spot she had been in since getting the HR email that morning, which she had read at 7:14, sitting on the edge of her bed in yesterday's scrubs, shoes still on. The HR email had been 3 paragraphs of formal language that managed to say a great deal without explaining anything. Administrative leave effective immediately. Pending internal review. Refrain from contact with staff or premises. No mention of the slap. No mention of the contract. No mention of Sylvia Hargrove at all. Just Amara's name. Just Amara's leave. She had read it 4 times, put the phone down, picked it up, and read it again. Then she went to the couch, pulled the blanket up, and stayed there. Now, 4 hours later, her phone buzzed again. This one was also from HR. She read it once, then again, then a 3rd time. Reinstatement, full back pay, formal written apology, return at her earliest convenience. She put the phone face down on the cushion beside her and sat there for a moment. Then the texts started. Nadine, get your scrubs ready. Come home. Calvin, told you I kept that footage. See you tonight, Ose. Priya, I froze on Friday. I've been sick about it since. You deserved better from every single one of us. I'm sorry. She stared at Priya's message the longest. Then she typed back, You're here now. That's not nothing. She got up, she showered, she ate something, she found her scrubs. She walked into Meridian General at 6:45 that evening, 15 minutes early, same as always. She stopped just inside the automatic doors for a half-second. The smell of the place hit her the way familiar places hit you when you've been away long enough to notice them again. Antiseptic, floor cleaner. Somewhere down the hall, someone's dinner from the cafeteria. Home. Nadine was standing just inside. Behind her, down the hallway, a line of people. Nurses, techs, a radiology tech from the 2nd floor she had shared an elevator with, maybe twice. Cafeteria workers. The man who cleaned the floors on the overnight shift, still in his work vest, who she learned later had come in 2 hours before his shift, just to be there. They weren't information. They weren't holding anything. They were just there, standing in the hallway, waiting. Nobody clapped. Nobody made a speech. Nadine hugged her first. Tight. The kind of hug that takes up the space that words can't reach. Then Calvin. Then Priya. Then people she barely knew personally, touching her shoulder, nodding, saying small things. Welcome back. We missed you. Glad you're here. Real talk. That hallway. 20 people who had done nothing on Friday, or not enough, choosing to be here now. Not because it fixed anything, because they knew it didn't fix anything, and they showed up anyway. That's the part that hits different, if you let yourself think about it. Dr. Sandra Tran, the new interim director, met Amara at the nurses' station. She was direct and unhurried. Effective today, this hospital has a zero-tolerance policy for abuse of staff. No exceptions. No contract makes someone above that policy. Ever. She said it loud enough for the floor to hear. She said it that way on purpose. Amara looked at her, nodded once. Then she reached into her pocket and took out her new badge, still in the plastic sleeve from HR. She opened the sleeve. She took the badge out. She pressed it flat against her chest, lined up the clip, and fastened it. She pressed it once more to make sure it was secure. Nobody said anything about it. But Priya, standing 2 feet away, felt the small thing she hadn't understood at the beginning of Friday's shift land inside her chest and settle there. Amara got to work. Her first patient that night was a 20-year-old with a dislocated shoulder, anxious and alone in the ER for the first time. Amara pulled a chair up beside the bed, sat down at eye level and said, "I'm Amara. I've got you." The young woman's shoulders dropped half an inch. That's medicine too, by the way, the part they don't teach enough. The 30 seconds you spend sitting down so someone knows they're not alone. It doesn't show up on a chart. It shows up in whether a person heals scared or heals held. At 8:14 that evening, Amara passed room 9. Constance Hargrove was still there. Her discharge had been delayed by a day for observation. She would go home tomorrow. Amara hesitated at the door. Then she stepped inside. Constance was sitting up in the bed. She looked smaller out of crisis, quieter. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her eyes went straight to the bruise on Amara's face, faded now to yellow at the edges, but still visible, still the shape of a hand. She held Amara's gaze for a moment. Then she looked down at her own hands. "I raised her," Constance said. Her voice was careful, not defending, not minimizing, just honest in the specific way that costs something. "I raised her, and there was a long time when I made excuses for things I should have addressed. Things I told myself weren't as serious as they were. I don't know exactly where the line is between what a parent is responsible for and what a grown person owns themselves." She paused. "But I know I am not outside of this. I can't be." Amara sat down in the chair beside the bed. She didn't say it wasn't Constance's fault. She didn't say it was. That wasn't the point. "What you just said," Amara said quietly, saying it out loud without excuses, that's harder than most people manage. Constance reached for Amara's hand. Her grip was gentle. Her eyes were wet. They sat together for a few minutes, not talking. The monitor made its steady sound. Outside in the hallway, the floor kept moving. When Amara stood to leave, Constance held her hand for one extra second. "You're a good one," Constance said. "Don't let anyone talk you out of that." Amara smiled, small, real, and reaching her eyes. She got home at 12:23 in the morning. Rafael had cooked pasta, garlic bread, a glass of wine already poured. The apartment smelled like something you come home to. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. The good kind of silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. Then Amara put down her fork. "The call," she said. 35 minutes before. "Why did you call that night?" Rafael looked up. "I remembered the anniversary, the night we met. I wanted to book the restaurant." He paused. "You didn't pick up, so I figured I'd ask when you got home." She looked at him for a moment. "You called to make a dinner reservation?" "Yeah." "And then came home to that?" "Yeah." She laughed. A short, real sound, the kind that surprises you coming out. Then she set her hand on the table between them. "I know what you did this week," she said. "I know more about what you are than you might think I know. And I need you to hear me on this." She didn't look away. "I don't need you to fight my battles. I would have fought this one, filed the complaint, hired the lawyer, gone to the press. I would have done it all. It would have taken longer and it would have cost me more, but I would have gotten there." Rafael held her gaze. He didn't argue. "Then why did I do it?" he said. "That's what I'm asking you." He thought about it for a moment. Really thought about it. "Because you shouldn't have to spend another night sitting alone in a parking garage with a bruise on your face and nobody doing anything about it. Not because you can't handle it. Because you deserve someone who doesn't make you handle it alone." She looked at him for a long moment. "Next time you decide something that affects my life," she said, "ask me first." "Deal." "That's not a small deal, Rafael." "I know." He held her gaze. "Deal." She picked up her fork. He picked up his. They talked about small things after that. The pasta, which was too garlicky. A story she had from the shift, something that made them both laugh about nothing important. Outside, the city moved. Inside the apartment, 2 people ate dinner. It was the most ordinary thing in the world. And that night, that was exactly what it needed to be. 3 weeks later, Amara Ose was promoted to charge nurse. The paperwork had been sitting in review for 4 months before the incident. After the board meeting and the coverage and the new director, it moved through in 9 days. Some things only move when someone is watching. Sylvia Hargrove accepted a no-contest plea on a misdemeanor assault charge. 180 hours of community service at a free clinic across town. Mandatory counseling. No non-disclosure agreement. No payment that made it disappear. On her first day at the clinic, a patient needed water. Sylvia got up, filled a cup, and brought it over. She didn't say anything. She just handed it over and went back to her chair. It was the smallest possible thing. It was also, for Sylvia Hargrove, the first time in recent memory that she had given something to a stranger without an angle attached to it. Without a donor dinner or a tax benefit or a social photograph. Just water. Just a cup. Just a person who needed it. I'm not telling you that fixed anything. I'm not telling you Sylvia Hargrove became someone different overnight. I'm telling you it happened, and that small, unremarkable gestures, performed consistently over time, are what most real change actually looks like. Not a dramatic reversal. A cup of water. Then another one. Then seeing the person you hand it to as a person. Maybe. Maybe not. That part isn't done yet. Here's what I want to leave you with. This story is fiction. Amara Ose is not a real person. But the look Sylvia gave her in the first 5 seconds, That look is real. A lot of people in this world have received that look. Some of you have received it in a place that was supposed to be professional, in a room where you were supposed to be safe, from someone who had decided before you opened your mouth what you were worth and what you were for. And some of you, standing in that hallway, were the people who saw it and did the math and found reasons not to speak. Neither of those groups needs me to tell them what it felt like. They already know. What I want to ask is something harder. Not what would you do? What would you be? Because in that ER on that Friday night, the choices weren't complicated. They were just costly. And every person in that hallway made a calculation about what they were willing to pay. Greta Lamb, who had nothing to gain, wrote 4 things on a notepad and folded it under her pillow. Calvin Reese, who had everything to lose, kept the footage on his camera and drove home and sat in his driveway thinking about who needed to know what he knew. Nadine Coulter closed the form and hated herself for it and took a screenshot of the message that would matter later. Priya Nair froze, and then she showed up on Tuesday. None of those people are heroes in a clean sense. They're people who did something imperfect under pressure and then tried to do the next thing better. That's most of us, most of the time. That's what it actually looks like. Amara didn't need a champion. She needed colleagues who would not make her fight alone. And eventually, too late and then not too late, that's what she got. That's the part worth remembering. Not the boardroom, not the vote. The hallway on a Tuesday evening, where 20 people who hadn't been enough on Friday chose to be something different today. If this one sat with you, share it with someone who needed to hear it today. And if you want to be here when the next story drops, subscribe. We'll be right here.